When Mason Hale walked into that singles mixer, he expected awkward small talk and cheap wine. What he got instead was table 14, and sitting directly across from him was Vanessa Quinn, the ex-wife he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. The woman he'd loved, the woman he'd failed. The CEO who'd rebuilt her entire life after their marriage collapsed under the weight of unspeakable grief. Within minutes, the whole room was staring. Phones came out, and then someone laughed at him, loud enough for everyone to hear. Stick around till the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Asheville Community Center smelled like desperation masked with vanilla air freshener and overpriced catering. Mason Hale stood just inside the doorway, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, already regretting every decision that had led him here. "You need this," his friend Derek had said 2 weeks ago, practically shoving the event flyer into Mason's hands. "You've been alone for 3 years, man. 3 years. Your kid needs to see you actually living again." Mason had thrown the flyer in the trash. Derek had retrieved it. They'd argued. Eventually, Mason had given in. Not because he believed Derek was right, but because he was too tired to keep fighting about it. Now here he was, surrounded by 50 other lonely souls pretending Friday night speed dating was somehow better than watching Netflix alone in sweatpants. The room was divided into numbered tables. Small votive candles flickered on each one, casting shadows that made everyone look either mysterious or mildly threatening depending on the angle. A woman in her mid-40s wearing too much perfume brushed past him, trailing a cloud of something floral and aggressive. "First time?" she asked, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Yeah," Mason muttered. "You'll get used to it. Third table rotation's usually when people start getting honest, or drunk. Sometimes both." She winked and disappeared into the crowd. Mason exhaled slowly. He was a high school English teacher. He spent his days explaining symbolism in The Great Gatsby to teenagers who thought reading was a punishment. He coached JV basketball. He made terrible pancakes every Sunday morning for his 7-year-old son, Carter. His life was small, predictable, safe. This, whatever this was, felt like stepping onto a stage he'd never auditioned for. "Welcome, everyone!" A woman with a clipboard and an aggressively cheerful voice stepped to the front of the room. "I'm Diana, and I'll be your host tonight. Let's make some connections, shall we?" Polite applause rippled through the room. Mason noticed several people already eyeing each other like shoppers evaluating produce. "Here's how it works," Diana continued. "You'll spend 7 minutes at each table. When you hear the bell, gentlemen rotate clockwise. Ladies, you stay put. Simple, right?" Nothing about this felt simple. Mason found his assigned starting position, table 9. Across from him sat a woman named Jennifer, who worked in pharmaceutical sales and had 2 cats named after Game of Thrones characters. She talked for 6 of the 7 minutes. Mason nodded occasionally. When the bell rang, he felt relief so intense it was almost embarrassing. Table 10. A dental hygienist named Shauna, who laughed at her own jokes. Table 11. A woman who spent the entire 7 minutes explaining her multi-level marketing business. Table 12. Someone's ex-girlfriend, apparently, because she spent the whole time texting and wouldn't make eye contact. By table 13, Mason had perfected his polite but disinterested expression. He was counting down rotations. 4 more. Then he could leave, tell Derek he'd tried, and go home to the quiet life he'd built, the one where nothing unexpected ever happened. The bell rang. Mason stood, grabbed his water glass, and moved to table 14. He sat down without looking up, pulling out his chair and settling in with the weary resignation of someone enduring a dental procedure. "So," he started, his rehearsed opener already forming, "what brings you—" The words died in his throat, because sitting directly across from him, frozen with a wine glass halfway to her lips, was Vanessa Quinn, his ex-wife. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. The noise of the room, laughter, clinking glasses, Diana's voice announcing something cheerful, faded into a dull roar Mason could barely process. Vanessa looked different. Not different in the way people do after a haircut or a new wardrobe. Different in the way that meant time had passed and life had happened, and the person sitting in front of him was both completely familiar and utterly unknown. Her hair was shorter, cut into a sleek style that framed her face. She wore a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse. Professional, expensive, carefully chosen. The kind of outfit someone wore when they needed armor. Her makeup was flawless. Her posture was perfect. But her eyes, those hadn't changed. Wide, dark brown, expressive in ways she'd never been able to fully control. Right now, they were filled with something that looked like panic. "Mason," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Vanessa." He didn't mean for her name to come out like an accusation, but it did. Around them, the room continued its chaotic rhythm. But at table 14, time had stopped. Mason's brain scrambled for something to say. "What are you doing here? Why didn't you tell me? Did you know I'd be here?" The questions piled up, none of them making it past his lips. Vanessa set down her wine glass carefully, like she was worried any sudden movement might shatter something. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I swear, I didn't know you'd be here." "Yeah, me neither." The silence stretched. Somewhere to their left, a woman laughed loudly at something her date said. At the table behind Vanessa, a man was explaining his workout routine in excruciating detail. Mason became acutely aware that people were starting to notice them. A woman at table 12 kept glancing over, her expression curious. Two men near the refreshment table had stopped talking and were staring. "We should," Vanessa started. "Yeah," Mason interrupted. "We should probably—" Neither of them moved. Vanessa's hands were folded on the table in front of her, fingers interlaced so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Mason recognized that gesture. She did it when she was trying to hold herself together, when she was afraid something inside her might crack if she loosened her grip even slightly. He'd seen her do it exactly twice before. Once at her father's funeral, and once at the hospital, 3 years ago, when the doctor had walked into the waiting room and delivered news that ended their entire world. Mason forced the memory down. "Not here. Not now." "How's Carter?" Vanessa asked suddenly. The question came out rushed, like she'd grabbed onto the first safe topic she could find. "He's good. Growing. Talks constantly." Mason's throat felt tight. "He's with Derek's wife tonight." Vanessa nodded. "That's good. Yeah, good." Another silence. This was absurd. They were two adults having the most stilted conversation in human history while surrounded by strangers trying to find love over 7-minute intervals and cheap Merlot. "Your company," Mason said, grasping for anything. "I heard it's doing well. I saw an article in the Observer a few months back." Something flickered across Vanessa's face. Pride, maybe, or exhaustion, or both. "We're managing. Growth has been steady." "That's impressive." "Thank you." They were talking like strangers, like two people who'd met 30 seconds ago and were struggling through small talk, not two people who'd once promised forever to each other, who'd bought a house together, who'd painted a nursery pale yellow because they couldn't agree on blue or pink and decided yellow was neutral enough, who'd buried a daughter together. Mason's chest tightened. "Listen," Vanessa said, her voice dropping even lower. "We don't have to do this. When the bell rings, you can leave. Go to the next table. I won't—" "Vanessa." She stopped. "I'm not running away from you," Mason said. The words landed heavier than he'd intended. Vanessa flinched, just barely, but enough that Mason caught it. "I didn't mean—" he started. "I know what you meant." The bell rang. Around them, people stood, gathered their things, moved to new tables. The rotation continued, but Mason didn't move, and neither did Vanessa. Diana's cheerful voice cut through the noise. "Gentlemen, don't forget to rotate. Ladies, stay seated." A man who'd been sitting at table 13 hovered near Mason's chair, clearly waiting for him to vacate. Mason didn't budge. "Excuse me," the man said, his tone polite but pointed. "You're supposed to move to the next—" "I'm staying here," Mason said, not looking away from Vanessa. The man blinked. "But the rotation—" "I'm aware." The man glanced between them, seemed to sense the tension crackling in the air, and wisely decided to find another table. Vanessa was staring at Mason like he'd just done something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, possibly both. "You're making a scene," she whispered. "Let them look." "Mason." But before she could finish, a voice cut through from 2 tables over, loud, drunk, and unmistakably mocking. "Oh my God, is that her ex-husband?" Mason's head snapped toward the sound. A blonde woman in her 30s, holding a martini like a weapon, was leaning toward her friend and stage whispering loud enough for half the room to hear. No way, the friend responded, equally loud. That's too perfect. I bet he's counting down the seconds until he can get away from her, the blonde continued, giggling. Look at his face. He looks like he wants to crawl under the table. The friend laughed. Divorced people at a singles mixer. That's just tragic. Something inside Mason snapped. He'd spent 3 years being quiet. 3 years nodding politely when people asked how he was doing. 3 years pretending he was fine when he was anything but. 3 years letting silence swallow everything he should have said. He stood up. The room didn't go quiet all at once. It was more gradual, a ripple of awareness spreading outward as people realized something was happening at table 14. Mason, don't! Vanessa's voice was urgent, pleading, but he was already talking. You want to know why I look uncomfortable? Mason said, his voice carrying across the room. He wasn't shouting, but he didn't need to. The space had gone quiet enough that every word landed like a stone in still water. The blonde woman's smirk faltered. I'm uncomfortable, Mason continued, because 3 years ago my wife and I lost our daughter. She was 8 months old. And instead of helping her grieve, instead of being the husband she needed, I shut down. I disappeared into my own head. I let her suffer alone while I pretended I was holding it together. Vanessa made a sound, small, choked. Mason didn't look at her. If he looked at her, he'd lose his nerve. I'm uncomfortable, he said, his voice rougher now, because I spent 3 years convincing myself I was protecting her by staying away. And now I'm sitting across from the woman I never stopped loving, realizing I've wasted all that time being a coward. The room was dead silent now. Mason finally turned to look at Vanessa. Tears were streaming down her face, silent, unchecked, devastating. I'm sorry, he said, and his voice cracked on the words. I'm so sorry, Vanessa, for all of it, for shutting you out, for letting you think I didn't care, for... Not here, Vanessa whispered. Her hands were shaking. Please, Mason, not here. She stood abruptly, grabbing her purse, nearly knocking over her wine glass in the process. Mason caught it before it tipped, his reflexes kicking in even as his heart hammered in his chest. Vanessa was already moving toward the exit, weaving through tables, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Mason didn't hesitate. He followed. Behind them, the room erupted in whispers. The October air hit Mason like a slap. Cold, sharp, carrying the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. Vanessa was halfway down the block, walking fast, her arms wrapped around herself. Vanessa, wait! Don't! She spun around and the streetlight caught the tears still streaking her face. Don't do that. Don't make some grand gesture in front of a room full of strangers, and then follow me out here like that fixes anything. I wasn't trying to fix anything, Mason said. I was trying to tell the truth. The truth? Vanessa's laugh was bitter, sharp-edged. You want to talk about truth now? After 3 years of silence? I know I don't deserve... You left me, Mason. Her voice broke. Maybe you didn't walk out the door, but you left. You were standing right next to me, and I've never felt more alone in my entire life. Mason's throat burned. I know. Do you? Vanessa stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Do you know what it was like? Losing Lily and then losing you in the same breath? Watching you turn into someone I didn't recognize. I needed you, and you just shut down. Like I didn't matter. Like she didn't matter. She mattered, Mason said, and the words came out fierce, raw. She mattered more than anything, and that's why I couldn't talk about it. Because every time I tried, I felt like I was drowning, and I thought if I just kept moving, kept working, kept taking care of Carter, I could outrun it. You can't outrun grief, Mason. I know that now. Vanessa wiped at her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Mason didn't have a good answer, or maybe he did, and he was just terrified to say it out loud. Because I saw you tonight, he said finally. And I realized I've been lying to myself for 3 years, telling myself you were better off without me, that you'd moved on, that I was doing the right thing by staying away. And now? Now I think I was just scared. Vanessa stared at him. A car passed, headlights sweeping over them briefly before plunging them back into shadow. I don't know what you want from me, she said quietly. Nothing, Mason said. I don't want anything. I just needed you to know that I never stopped. He stopped himself, but Vanessa caught it. Never stopped what? Mason looked at her, really looked at her. The woman he'd married 8 years ago, the woman he'd promised to protect and failed spectacularly, the woman who'd rebuilt herself into someone stronger, sharper, more guarded. I never stopped loving you, he said. Vanessa closed her eyes. Fresh tears slipped down her cheeks. That doesn't change anything, she whispered. I know. They stood there in the cold Asheville night, two broken people who'd once been whole together, and Mason felt the weight of everything they'd lost pressing down on him like a physical thing. I should go, Vanessa said eventually. She turned away. Vanessa? She stopped but didn't turn around. Can I? Mason's voice was hoarse. Can I call you sometime? Just to talk. For a long moment she didn't respond. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. I don't know if that's a good idea. She walked away. Mason watched until she disappeared around the corner, then he stood there alone on the empty street, hands in his pockets, breathing fog into the cold air. His phone buzzed. A text from Derek. How's it going? Mason typed back. Ran into Vanessa. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, what? Mason pocketed his phone without responding. He started walking. No destination, just movement. The streets of downtown Asheville were alive with Friday night energy. Couples holding hands, groups of friends laughing outside bars, people living normal lives where the worst thing that happened was a bad date or a spilled drink. Mason kept walking until he found himself outside Dixon's Diner, a 24-hour place he and Vanessa used to go to when they were dating. Late-night pancakes after movies, coffee at 2 a.m. when Carter was a newborn and sleep was a distant memory. He almost kept walking. But then he saw her. Vanessa was sitting in a booth near the window, staring at a cup of coffee like it held answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. Mason's feet carried him inside before his brain could talk him out of it. The bell above the door chimed. Vanessa looked up. When she saw him, something complicated crossed her face. Surprise, frustration, and underneath it all, something that might have been relief. Are you following me? She asked as he approached. No, maybe. I don't know. Mason gestured at the empty seat across from her. Can I sit? Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. He slid into the booth. The vinyl was cracked and patched with duct tape. The table was scarred with decades of use. Nothing had changed since the last time they'd been here together. A waitress appeared, elderly, sharp-eyed, with a name tag that read Dolores. Coffee? She asked Mason. Please. She poured, set down 2 creamer cups, and disappeared without another word. Mason wrapped his hands around the mug, grateful for the warmth. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, streaking the window. I come here sometimes, Vanessa said quietly, when I need to think. Me too. They sat in silence. Not the uncomfortable kind from the mixer, but something heavier. The kind of silence that carried the weight of everything unsaid between them. I wasn't lying, Vanessa said eventually. When I said I didn't know you'd be at that mixer, my assistant signed me up, said I needed to get back out there. She made air quotes around the last part, her expression wry. Derek did the same to me, literally would not shut up about it until I agreed. They sound terrible. The worst. A ghost of a smile touched Vanessa's lips, there and gone in an instant. Mason took a breath. I meant what I said. Out there. All of it. The smile vanished. Mason, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm not asking you to forgive me or give me another chance, or I just need you to know that I see it now. How badly I failed you. How much I hurt you by shutting down instead of letting you in. Vanessa's hands were wrapped around her own coffee mug, knuckles white again. Do you know what the hardest part was? Her voice was barely above a whisper. It wasn't losing Lily. I mean, it absolutely was. But the hardest part was losing her and then watching you disappear, watching the man I loved turn into a stranger who could barely look at me. Mason's vision blurred. I didn't know how to do it, he said roughly. I didn't know how to grieve and be strong for you and take care of Carter and not completely fall apart. So I shut it all down. And by the time I realized what I was doing, you were already gone. I had to leave, Mason. I was drowning, and you weren't even reaching for me. I know. I built a whole life without you. Vanessa's voice cracked. I rebuilt myself. I took a struggling company and turned it into something that matters. I wake up every morning and I function. I go to meetings and make decisions and pretend I'm fine, and I am fine. Most days, I'm fine. And the other days? Vanessa looked away. The other days, I remember what it felt like to be loved by you, and I hate that I still miss it. Something broke open in Mason's chest. I'm so sorry, Vanessa, for all of it, for not being what you needed, for letting you carry everything alone, for... Stop. Vanessa held up a hand. Please, I can't do this right now. But she didn't leave. She sat there, tears streaming down her face, while Mason sat across from her feeling helpless and wrecked and more present than he'd been in 3 years. Outside, the rain picked up, drumming against the window. Dolores appeared with a coffee pot, topped off their mugs without asking, and vanished again like a benevolent ghost. Do you ever say her name? Vanessa asked suddenly. Mason froze. What? Lily. Vanessa's voice broke on the word. Do you ever say it? Out loud? Mason realized with dawning horror that he didn't. Not anymore. Not since the funeral. He talked around it, when we lost her. After everything happened. The baby. But never her actual name. No, he admitted. I don't. Me neither. Fresh tears spilled over. I tried once, about a year ago. I was in a board meeting and someone asked about my family and I opened my mouth to say it, and I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Vanessa. She existed, Mason. She was real. She was ours. And we don't even say her name anymore. Mason felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Lily, he said, and his voice cracked completely. Our daughter's name was Lily. Vanessa made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Yeah, it was. She had your eyes, Mason continued, the words pouring out now, and this tiny dimple on her left cheek that only showed up when she smiled. And she hated being cold. We had to warm her bottles to exactly the right temperature or she'd scream. She smelled like powder and milk, Vanessa added, crying openly now. And she'd grab onto your finger and hold on like she never wanted to let go. I think about her every day, Mason said. Every single day. And I hate that I was too scared to tell you that. I think about her too. Vanessa wiped at her face with a napkin. I think about what she'd look like now, if she'd be shy like you or bossy like me, if she'd like soccer or art or... She broke off, shoulders shaking. Mason didn't think. He just moved, sliding out of his side of the booth and into hers, wrapping his arms around her while she fell apart against his chest. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry. Vanessa cried harder, her hands fisting in his jacket like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. They stayed like that, two broken people holding on to each other in a diner booth while rain hammered the windows, and the rest of Asheville went on living their normal Friday nights, until Vanessa's sobs quieted into hiccups and her breathing steadied. I got makeup all over your jacket, she said finally, her voice muffled against his chest. I don't care. She pulled back slightly, just enough to look up at him. Her mascara was smudged, her eyes were red and puffy. She looked wrecked. She looked beautiful. I don't know what to do with this, Vanessa whispered. With you. With any of it. Me neither, Mason admitted. I can't go back to how things were. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Mason thought about it, really thought about it. Nothing, he said finally. I'm not asking for anything. I'm tired of pretending you don't matter, that we didn't matter, that Lily didn't matter. Vanessa's eyes filled again. She mattered so much. Yeah, she did. They sat there, not quite holding each other, but not quite letting go either, while the rain continued and Dolores refilled their coffee, and somewhere in the back of the diner, an old jukebox played a song neither of them recognized. Eventually, Vanessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed. My sister, she's been texting every 10 minutes since I left the mixer. Caroline still hate me? With the fire of 1,000 suns. But there was a hint of affection in Vanessa's voice when she said it. Fair. Vanessa tucked her phone away without responding to the text. I should go, it's late. Yeah. Neither of them moved. Mason? Yeah? Thank you, For saying her name. Mason's throat tightened. We should have been saying it all along. Yeah, we should have. Vanessa slid out of the booth, gathering her purse. Mason stood too, pulling out his wallet, but Dolores appeared and waved him off. On the house, she said gruffly. You two look like you've been through enough. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Vanessa's car was parked half a block down. They walked toward it in silence, shoulders almost touching. At her car, Vanessa turned to face him. I don't know what happens now. Me neither. I'm not making any promises. I'm not asking for any. She studied his face like she was trying to memorize it, or maybe trying to figure out if he was still the man she'd married or someone else entirely. Good night, Mason. Good night, Vanessa. She got in her car. Mason watched her drive away, then he stood there on the empty street, rain soaking through his jacket, feeling more awake than he'd been in 3 years. His phone buzzed again. Derek, persistent as always. Dude, details. Mason typed back. Tomorrow. I'll explain tomorrow. He started walking toward his own car, parked somewhere back near the community center. The night felt different somehow, sharper, more real, like he'd been sleepwalking for 3 years and had finally woken up. He didn't know what happened next. Didn't know if Vanessa would call or if tonight was just closure on a chapter that needed ending. But for the first time since Lily died, Mason felt like he could breathe. And maybe that was enough. For now, it had to be. Mason didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the diner. The way Vanessa's voice had broken when she said Lily's name. The weight of her in his arms when she'd finally let herself cry. The look in her eyes when she'd said she didn't know what to do with any of this. He didn't either. At 6 a.m, he gave up on sleep and went downstairs. Made coffee, burned toast. Stood at the kitchen window watching the sun come up over the neighborhood while his mind spun in circles. His phone sat on the counter, silent and accusatory. He'd told Vanessa he wasn't asking for anything, and he'd meant it, but that didn't stop him from hoping she'd text, call, send some signal that last night had mattered. Nothing came. By 7, Carter was awake and demanding pancakes. Mason made them on autopilot, flipping them too early so they came out half-cooked in the middle. These are gross, Dad, Carter announced, poking at his breakfast with a fork. Yeah, sorry, bud. Carter studied him with the unsettling perception 7-year-olds sometimes had. Are you sad? No, just tired. You look sad. Mason managed a smile. I'm fine. Eat your gross pancakes. Derek showed up at 8:30, letting himself in through the back door like he owned the place. He took one look at Mason and whistled low. You look like hell. Thanks. Carter, go watch TV or something, Derek said. Your dad and I need to talk. Carter shrugged and disappeared into the living room. Within seconds, the sound of cartoons filled the house. Derek sat down at the kitchen table and fixed Mason with a look. Talk. So Mason did. He told Derek everything, the mixer, the confrontation, following Vanessa out into the rain, the diner, saying Lily's name out loud for the first time in 3 years. When he finished, Derek was quiet for a long moment. Well, he said finally, that's either the best thing you've ever done or the worst. Time will tell. Helpful. What do you want me to say, man? You just ripped open 3 years of scar tissue in front of a room full of strangers and then had an emotional breakdown with your ex-wife at a diner. That's not exactly something I can summarize with advice. Mason dropped his head into his hands. I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, I got that. Derek leaned back in his chair. Question is, what do you want to be doing? I don't know. Bullshit. You know, you're just scared to say it. Mason looked up. Derek's expression was serious now, none of his usual sarcasm in sight. I want her back, Mason said quietly. I want my wife back. I want to fix what I broke. You think that's possible? I don't know, probably not. She's got a whole life now. She's rebuilt everything without me. Why would she want to go backward? Maybe she wouldn't be going backward, Derek said. Maybe you'd both be going forward, just together this time. Mason wanted to believe that. Wanted it so badly his chest ached with it. His phone buzzed. Both men looked at it like it was a live grenade. Mason picked it up, heart hammering. It was a text from an unknown number, except it wasn't unknown. He'd know that number anywhere, even though he'd deleted it from his contacts 2 years ago in a moment of self-preservation. The message was short. Can we talk? Not today. I need time. But soon. Mason showed Derek the screen. Well, Derek said, there's your answer. Mason texted back. Whenever you're ready. The three dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, thank you. Derek stood, clapping Mason on the shoulder. Whatever happens, man, I'm glad you finally said something. Watching you pretend to be fine for 3 years was exhausting. I wasn't pretending. Yeah, you were. You were just good at it. Derek headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Vanessa was pretending too. I saw her at that fundraiser last spring. She looked miserable. She's a CEO, Derek. She's probably just stressed. Maybe. Or maybe she's been just as lost as you've been. Derek left before Mason could respond. Mason looked at his phone again, at Vanessa's message, at the possibility hanging in those few short words. He didn't let himself hope. Not yet. Hope was dangerous. Hope could break you worse than grief if you weren't careful. But for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than numb. And that was something. The photograph showed up online Sunday afternoon. Mason was grading essays at the kitchen table when his phone started blowing up, text after text from numbers he barely recognized, Facebook friend requests from people he'd never met, a notification that he'd been tagged in a photo on some local Asheville social media page. He opened it. Someone had taken a picture of them through the diner window Friday night. The image was blurry, shot through rain-streaked glass, but clear enough. Vanessa was crying. Mason had his arms around her. The caption read, "Saw this CEO and her ex at Dixon's last night after they walked out of the singles mixer together. Anyone know the story?" The post had 300 comments and counting. "Are you kidding me?" Mason muttered. He scrolled through the comments. Half were speculating wildly about what had happened. The other half were debating whether it was romantic or tragic or both. Someone had identified Vanessa. Someone else had found Mason's Facebook page and posted his name. Within hours, the photo had been shared to 5 different Asheville community groups. Mason's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. "Hello? Mr. Hale? This is Stephanie Chen from the Asheville Citizen-Times. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about—" Mason hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. He turned it off. By Monday morning, the photo had been picked up by a local lifestyle blog. By Tuesday, someone had sent it to one of those viral social media accounts that specialized in feel-good stories about love and second chances. The caption read, "When you run into your ex-wife at a singles mixer and end up crying together in a diner, sometimes love deserves a second chance." It had 50,000 likes. Mason wanted to crawl into a hole. His principal called him into her office Wednesday morning. "I'm not here to lecture you," Dr. Martinez said, gesturing for him to sit. "But I wanted to make sure you're okay. The photo that's been circulating—" "I know, it's everywhere. Some of the students have been talking about it. I've shut down what I can, but you know how high schoolers are." Mason rubbed his face. "Yeah. Is there anything you need? Time off? We can get a sub—" "No. I'm fine. I'd rather just keep working." Dr. Martinez studied him. "For what it's worth, Mason, I think what you did took courage. Not many people would be that honest in public." "I wasn't trying to be courageous. I was just tired of lying." She smiled. Sometimes that's the same thing. By Thursday, Mason still hadn't heard from Vanessa beyond that first text. He tried not to read into it, tried not to refresh his messages every 5 minutes like a teenager waiting for a crush to respond. She said she needed time. He could give her that. But it was killing him. Friday afternoon, he was picking Carter up from school when his phone finally rang with Vanessa's number. He answered so fast he nearly dropped it. "Hello?" "Hi." Her voice was quiet, careful. "Is this a bad time?" No, it's fine. Carter's in the car, but he's got headphones in." "Okay." A pause. "I saw the photo." Mason winced. "Yeah, so did most of Asheville, apparently. My assistant asked if I wanted to issue a statement. I told her no." "You could have, if it would help with your company image or whatever." "I don't care about my company image, Mason." She sounded tired. "I care about the fact that someone photographed one of the worst nights of my life and turned it into entertainment." "One of the worst nights?" Mason's stomach dropped. I didn't think it was good, but—" "I meant worst in the sense that it hurt," Vanessa interrupted. Not that I regret it. I don't. It was a lot. And then seeing it plastered all over the internet with strangers commenting on our marriage like they know anything about us. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. Still, I'm sorry. Another pause. Then, are you free Saturday afternoon? Mason's heart kicked against his ribs. Yes, I can be. There's a park near my house, Riverside Park. Do you know it? I'll find it. 2 o'clock? I'll be there. Okay. Her voice softened slightly. See you then. She hung up before he could respond. Mason sat in the school parking lot, phone pressed to his chest, feeling like he'd just run a marathon. Carter pulled his headphones down. Was that Mom? Mason glanced in the rearview mirror. Carter was watching him with those two observant eyes. Yeah, bud, it was. Is she okay? I think so. Are you okay? Mason met his son's gaze in the mirror. I don't know yet, but I'm trying to be. Carter seemed to accept this. He put his headphones back in and went back to his video. Mason drove home on autopilot, his mind already spinning forward to Saturday. Riverside Park was exactly the kind of place Vanessa would pick. Quiet, away from downtown, with walking paths that wound through trees and along the water. Mason arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time pacing near the parking lot like an idiot. At 2 o'clock exactly, Vanessa's car pulled in. She got out slowly, like she was bracing herself. She dressed down, jeans, a sweater, running shoes. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup that Mason could see. She looked tired. Real. Nothing like the polished CEO from the mixer. Hi, she said. Hi. They stood there for an awkward beat, neither sure how to start. Want to walk? Vanessa finally asked. Yeah, sure. They fell into step beside each other, maintaining a careful distance. The path was mostly empty, just a few joggers and a woman walking her dog. For a while, neither of them spoke, just walked. The silence wasn't entirely comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either, more like they were both trying to find their footing. My sister wants to meet with you, Vanessa said eventually. Mason nearly tripped. Caroline, why? Because she saw the photo, and because I told her we'd talked, and because she's convinced you're going to hurt me again, and she wants to make sure you know exactly what will happen if you do. That sounds terrifying. It should be. Caroline doesn't make idle threats. You told her not to come, right? Vanessa glanced at him. Actually, I told her she could. Mason stopped walking. What? Vanessa stopped too, turning to face him. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, then Caroline needs to be okay with it. Or at least not actively trying to destroy you. She's my sister. She protected me when I fell apart. I can't just shut her out now. So she's going to what? Interrogate me? Probably. Vanessa's expression was apologetic but firm. I know it's not fair, but that's the deal. Mason thought about it. Thought about Caroline Quinn, corporate attorney, fiercely protective older sister, someone who'd probably cheerfully ruin his life if she thought he deserved it. Okay, he said. Vanessa blinked. Okay? Yeah, if that's what you need, then okay. When? Tomorrow, my place, 6 o'clock. Mason's stomach twisted, but he nodded. I'll be there. They started walking again. Vanessa's shoulders had relaxed slightly, like she'd been expecting him to fight her on this. Can I ask you something? Mason said after a few minutes. Maybe. Why did you agree to see me? After everything. After 3 years of silence. Why now? Vanessa was quiet for so long Mason thought she wasn't going to answer. Because you said her name, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. In the diner. You said Lily's name and you talked about her like she was real. Like she mattered. And I realized I've spent 3 years surrounded by people who are too afraid to mention her, who talk around her like she's a landmine. And I'm so tired of it, Mason. I'm so tired of pretending she never existed just to make other people comfortable. Mason's throat tightened. Me too. My therapist says I need to stop running from the grief, that I can't build a real life if I'm constantly trying to outrun what happened. Vanessa wiped at her eyes, and I looked at you in that diner, and I thought, here's someone who knows, who remembers, who loved her too. I did. I do. I know. Vanessa stopped walking again, this time turning to fully face him. But loving her isn't enough, Mason. It wasn't enough 3 years ago, and it's not enough now. If we're going to try this, and I'm not saying we are, I'm just saying if, then things have to be different. You have to be different. I know. Do you? Because it's easy to say you'll change. It's harder to actually do it. Mason looked at her, really looked at her, at the exhaustion in her eyes, at the way she held herself like she was braced for disappointment. I've been seeing a therapist, he said. Started about 6 months ago. I couldn't keep doing what I was doing, pretending I was fine, avoiding anything that felt too hard. It was killing me. Slowly, but still. Vanessa's expression shifted. You're in therapy? Yeah, every other Wednesday, Dr. Patterson. He specializes in grief counseling. How's it going? Some days better than others, but I'm trying. Mason shoved his hands in his pockets. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago, Vanessa. I'm not saying I'm fixed or that I've got it all figured out, but I'm trying to be someone who can actually handle his own emotions instead of shutting down every time things get hard. Vanessa studied him. I've been in therapy too, since about a year after the divorce. Yeah? Dr. Reeves, she's helped me understand why I throw myself into work instead of dealing with feelings. Why I built this whole perfect image of someone who has it all together when most days I barely know how to function. They stood there on the path, two people who'd been carrying their pain alone finally admitting they'd both been struggling. We're a mess, Vanessa said softly. Yeah, we really are. I don't know if we can fix this. Me neither. But I want to try. The words came out rushed, like she was afraid she'd lose her nerve if she didn't say them quickly. I don't know what that looks like or where it goes, but I want to try. If you do. Mason felt something crack open in his chest. I do. More than anything. Vanessa nodded, blinking back tears. Okay, but we go slow. We don't rush this, and if it starts to fall apart, if we start falling back into old patterns, we stop. We don't drag it out until we destroy each other again. Agreed. And you have to survive Caroline first. Mason laughed despite himself. Right, that. They walked for another hour, talking carefully about nothing important. Work, Carter, the weather, testing the waters, figuring out how to exist in the same space without the weight of their history crushing them. When they finally headed back to the parking lot, Vanessa paused beside her car. Tomorrow, she said. 6 o'clock. Don't be late. I won't. She got in her car, then rolled down the window. Mason? Yeah? Thank you for being honest, for trying. Thank you for giving me a chance. She drove away, and Mason stood there in the parking lot feeling like he'd just been given something fragile and terrifying and precious. He had 24 hours to prepare for Caroline Quinn. He was absolutely not prepared. Mason showed up at Vanessa's house at 5:55, clutching a bottle of wine he'd spent 30 minutes picking out and immediately regretted. Who brought wine to their own potential execution? The house was nicer than anywhere they'd lived together, a renovated craftsman in one of Asheville's better neighborhoods. Vanessa had clearly done well for herself. He rang the doorbell. Vanessa answered, looking nervous. Hi, you came. You doubted I would? Little bit, yeah. She let him in. The interior was tasteful, modern, impersonal, like a magazine spread, nothing like the cluttered, comfortable home they'd shared before. Caroline's in the living room, Vanessa said quietly. Fair warning, she's already mad. Great, Vanessa touched his arm briefly. Just be honest, that's all you can do. Mason followed her into a living room where Caroline Quinn sat in an armchair like a judge presiding over court. She was older than Vanessa by 4 years, sharper around the edges, dressed in expensive casual clothes that somehow still looked intimidating. Mason, she said coldly. Caroline. Sit. Mason sat on the couch. Vanessa perched on the arm beside him, clearly trying to act as a buffer. Caroline studied him for a long moment. You have a lot of nerve showing up here. Caroline, Vanessa started. No. Caroline held up a hand. I get to say this. I watched you fall apart after he left. I held you while you cried yourself sick. I sat with you in that empty house while you packed up a nursery that would never be used. So I get to say this. Mason forced himself to hold her gaze. You're right. You do. That seemed to throw her slightly. She'd been geared up for a fight. I'm not here to ask permission, Mason continued. I'm here because Vanessa asked me to be. But you're right. I hurt her. Badly. I failed her when she needed me most, and I don't have an excuse for that. I was a coward, and I let grief turn me into someone who couldn't be what she needed. Caroline's expression didn't soften. And you think 3 years and some therapy makes that okay? No, it doesn't make it okay. Nothing makes it okay. Mason leaned forward. But I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago, and I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were. I'm just asking for a chance to prove I can be better. Why should we believe you? You shouldn't, not yet. I have to earn that. Vanessa was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Caroline stood, pacing to the window. You know what kills me? It's that she never stopped loving you, even after everything, even after you made her feel like she was mourning alone. She never stopped. Caroline, that's not... Vanessa's voice was tight. It's true and you know it. Caroline turned back to Mason. If you hurt her again, I will make your life a living hell. I will tie you up in legal battles until you're bankrupt. I will make sure every person in this city knows exactly what kind of man you are. Do you understand me? Yes. I'm not joking. I know you're not. They stared at each other. Mason didn't look away. Finally, Caroline sighed. I need a drink. Vanessa, do you have any of that scotch left? Kitchen cabinet, left of the sink. Caroline left the room. The second she was gone, Vanessa let out a breath. That went better than I expected, she said. She threatened to bankrupt me. Yeah, but she didn't throw anything. For Caroline, that's basically approval. Mason laughed shakily. Your family's terrifying. You married into it voluntarily. Fair point. Caroline returned with 3 glasses of scotch. She handed one to Mason, one to Vanessa, and kept one for herself. A toast, she said dryly, to second chances and the idiots who need them. They drank. The scotch burned going down, but it loosened something in the room. Caroline sat back down, some of the hostility leaving her posture. So what's the plan? She asked. You two dating again? Getting remarried? What? We're taking it slow, Vanessa said quickly. Just talking, seeing if we can rebuild trust. How slow? Very slow. We haven't even... Vanessa glanced at Mason. We're just talking. Caroline raised an eyebrow. You always were the patient one. She took another sip. Fine, but I'm watching, both of you. And if this falls apart, Vanessa, you call me. You don't suffer through it alone trying to be strong. Got it? Got it. Caroline stood. I should go. I have depositions to prep for tomorrow. She pointed at Mason. Remember what I said. I'm not bluffing. I believe you. She grabbed her coat and left, the door closing firmly behind her. Mason and Vanessa sat in silence for a moment. So, Mason said eventually, that was fun. Vanessa laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. She likes you. That was her liking me? Trust me, if she didn't, you'd know. Mason set down his scotch glass. Thank you for letting me come, for giving me a chance to explain to her. She needed to hear it, and honestly, I needed to hear it too, how you handled her. Vanessa looked at him. You didn't get defensive, you didn't make excuses, you just told the truth. It's all I've got. It's enough. She stood. I should probably let you go, it's getting late. Mason stood too, but he didn't move toward the door. Vanessa? Yeah? Can I ask you something? And you can say no, What? Can I see you again? Next weekend, maybe. Or whenever you're free. Just to talk more, keep doing this. Vanessa smiled, small, tentative, but real. I'd like that. Yeah? Yeah. Mason felt like he could breathe for the first time all evening. Okay, good. I'll call you. You better. She walked him to the door. They stood there awkwardly, neither quite sure how to say goodbye. Thank you, Mason said, for all of this, for being willing to try. Thank you for giving me a reason to. He left before he could do something stupid like kiss her. That wasn't what this was. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as he drove home, he couldn't stop the hope from building in his chest. They were trying, both of them. Actually trying. And maybe that was enough to start with. Over the next few weeks, Mason and Vanessa fell into a careful rhythm. Coffee on Wednesdays after his therapy appointment. Walks on Saturday afternoons, long phone calls that stretched late into the night where they talked about everything and nothing. They didn't talk about getting back together, didn't define what they were doing, just existed in this strange in-between space where they were learning each other again. Mason learned that Vanessa had become obsessed with true crime podcasts, that she still couldn't cook to save her life, that she'd adopted a cat named Chairman who apparently ruled her house with an iron paw. Vanessa learned that Mason had started writing again, poetry mostly, bad poetry he'd never show anyone, that Carter had him wrapped around his little finger, that he still couldn't watch certain movies without crying. They learned to say Lily's name, not constantly, not forcing it, but naturally, in conversation, in memory, acknowledging that she'd existed and mattered and would always be part of them. It was healing. Slowly. Imperfectly. And then one Wednesday in late November, everything shifted. They were sitting in their usual coffee shop when Vanessa's phone rang. She glanced at it and her expression changed. "I need to take this," she said. "It's my COO." She stepped outside. Mason watched through the window as her posture went rigid. Whatever she was hearing, it wasn't good. She came back inside 5 minutes later looking shaken. "What's wrong?" Mason asked immediately. "There's a problem at work. Major problem. I need to go." She was already gathering her things. "I'm sorry, I have to." "What happened?" "One of our suppliers just backed out of a contract. It's going to affect our entire Q4 production schedule. If I don't fix this in the next 48 hours, we could lose millions." Mason stood. "What do you need?" Vanessa looked at him, surprised. "What? What do you need? How can I help?" "Mason, this is work stuff. You can't—" "I can listen. I can be there. I can do whatever you need." He grabbed his jacket. "You don't have to do this alone." For a second, Vanessa just stared at him. Then her eyes filled with tears. "I have to go to Charlotte tonight. There's a meeting tomorrow morning that I can't miss." "Okay, then go. I'll be here when you get back. It might be a week, maybe more." "I'll still be here." Vanessa nodded, wiping quickly at her eyes. "I need to pack. I need to call my assistant. I need to—" "Hey." Mason caught her hand gently. "Breathe. You've got this." She squeezed his hand. "Come with me." Mason blinked. "What?" "To Charlotte. Come with me." The words tumbled out fast. "I know it's crazy and we're taking things slow and you probably can't just leave Carter for a week, but I don't want to do this alone. I'm tired of doing everything alone." Mason's heart was pounding. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm asking anyway." Mason thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "I need to call Derek, see if Carter can stay with him, and I need to email my principal for emergency leave." "So that's a yes." "That's a yes." Vanessa let out a breath that might have been a laugh. Okay. Meet me at my house in 2 hours." "I'll be there." She left, moving fast, already on her phone. Mason sat back down, slightly dizzy. He'd just agreed to go to Charlotte for a week with his ex-wife, who he was maybe sort of trying to rebuild a relationship with. This was either the best decision he'd ever made or the worst. Time would tell. Derek answered on the second ring, sounding suspicious before Mason even spoke. "You only call me during the day when something's wrong or you need something. Can Carter stay with you for a week? Maybe longer?" A pause. "Why?" "Vanessa has a work emergency in Charlotte. She asked me to come with her." "She asked you to—" Derek stopped. Mason could practically hear him recalibrating. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. I know it's a lot to ask, but Carter can stay here as long as you need. Kim will be thrilled. She's been saying we should have him over more anyway." Derek's voice dropped. "But Mason, are you sure about this? A week alone with Vanessa in another city while she's stressed about work? That's a lot of pressure." "I know. If this goes sideways, then it goes sideways. But I'm tired of playing it safe. She asked for help. I'm going to help." Derek was quiet for a moment. "All right, bring Carter over. We'll handle everything here." Mason exhaled. "Thanks, man. I owe you." "Yeah, you do. And I'm collecting when you get back. I want details." Mason hung up and immediately called his principal. Dr. Martinez was surprisingly understanding, probably because he'd been working there 7 years without ever taking a sick day. She approved a week of emergency personal leave and told him to handle what he needed to handle. 2 hours later, Mason pulled up to Vanessa's house with a hastily packed duffel bag and no real idea what he was getting into. Her car was in the driveway, trunk open, a garment bag already loaded inside. He found her in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, laptop open on the counter, looking like she was trying to be in 3 places at once. I don't care what James says, we need those shipment manifests by morning or the whole timeline falls apart, she was saying, her free hand typing rapidly. Yes, I know it's late. No, I don't care. Get it done. She hung up, saw Mason, and some of the tension in her shoulders eased fractionally. You came. I said I would. I know, but I thought maybe you'd come to your senses. Not yet.
Vanessa almost smiled. I need 10 more minutes. My assistant's sending files I need to review on the drive. Chairman needs to be fed, and I can't find my phone charger. I'll find the charger. You finish what you're doing. Mason located the charger plugged in by her nightstand upstairs. The bedroom was surprisingly messy. Clothes draped over a chair, books stacked on the nightstand, a coffee mug someone had forgotten about. It felt more human than the showroom-perfect living room downstairs.
He brought the charger down. Vanessa was still on her laptop, muttering under her breath about logistics. Hey, Mason said gently, we should go soon if you want to beat traffic. She nodded, closing the laptop with more force than necessary. Right. Okay, let me just... She looked around like she'd forgotten what she was supposed to be doing. Vanessa, she stopped. It's going to be okay. Whatever happens with this supplier situation, you'll figure it out. You always do. You don't know that. Yeah, I do. You're brilliant at this. It's one of the things He caught himself. It's one of your strengths. Vanessa stared at him for a second, then grabbed her laptop bag. We should go. The drive to Charlotte took 2.5 hours. Vanessa spent the first hour on phone calls, rapid-firing instructions to people whose names Mason didn't recognize. He drove and stayed quiet, letting her work. Around the halfway point, she finally hung up and dropped her phone in her lap with a groan. I'm sorry, this is a terrible idea. I shouldn't have asked you to come. Why not? Because I'm going to be working constantly. You're going to be stuck in a hotel room watching me stress out about quarterly projections and supplier contracts. This isn't what we need right now. What do we need right now? Vanessa looked at him. I don't know, but probably not this. I disagree. Mason kept his eyes on the road. For 3 years, you dealt with everything alone. Work crises, grief, rebuilding your life, all of it alone. Maybe what we need is for you to not be alone this time. Her voice went quiet. I don't know how to not be alone anymore. Then let me remind you. She didn't respond, but she reached over and turned the radio on, some station playing old indie rock. They drove the rest of the way in silence that felt less heavy than before. The hotel was downtown, sleek and expensive, and exactly the kind of place a CEO on a business trip would stay. Vanessa had booked 2 rooms. Mason tried not to read into that and mostly succeeded. Tomorrow's going to be brutal, Vanessa said as they stood in the lobby with their bags. Meeting at 8 with the supplier's legal team. Then calls with our board. Probably won't be done until late. I'll be around. Text me if you need anything. She hesitated. Do you want to have dinner tonight? There's a restaurant attached to the hotel. Nothing fancy, just, I don't know, food. Yeah, I'd like that. They met in the hotel restaurant an hour later. Vanessa had changed into jeans and a sweater, her hair down, makeup scrubbed off. She looked exhausted. They ordered, made small talk about nothing important while they waited for food. But there was a tension underneath it, like they were both waiting for something neither wanted to name. Can I ask you something? Vanessa said eventually, picking at her salad. Sure. Why did you really come? And don't say it's because I asked. I want the real reason. Mason set down his fork. Because 3 years ago, when you needed me most, I wasn't there. And I've regretted it every single day since. So when you asked me to come with you, even though it scared the hell out of me, I couldn't say no. Because maybe this time I can actually show up. Vanessa's eyes were bright. You're showing up now, these past few weeks, the coffee, the walks, the phone calls. You've been showing up. I know. But this feels different. This is you letting me see you when things aren't perfect. When you're stressed and overwhelmed and not sure how to fix something, you never let me see that before. You never asked to see it. I know, I should have. The waiter appeared with their entrees, breaking the moment. They ate quietly, the restaurant humming with low conversation around them. I'm scared, Vanessa admitted suddenly, About tomorrow. About this whole supplier situation. If we can't resolve it, we're looking at major financial losses. And I know I should have contingency plans and backup suppliers and all of that, but I got complacent. I trusted the wrong people, and now it's falling apart. That doesn't make you a bad CEO. That makes you human. Being human doesn't pay the bills. No, but being human means you can ask for help when you need it. Vanessa laughed, but it sounded hollow. I don't know how to do that. I spent so long building this image of someone who has all the answers, someone who doesn't break, and now everyone expects me to be that person all the time. You don't have to be that person with me. She looked at him. I don't know how to not be that person anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. They finished dinner and walked back to the elevators. Vanessa's room was on the 8th floor. Mason's was on the 6th. At the 8th floor, the doors opened. Vanessa stepped out, then turned back. Thank you for coming. Really, even if I'm a disaster tomorrow, I'm glad you're here. You won't be a disaster. You don't know that. Yeah, I do. The elevator doors started to close. Vanessa caught them. Mason? Yeah? I'm glad we're trying this, whatever this is. I'm glad. Before he could respond, she let the doors close. Mason rode down to the 6th floor feeling like he'd just been given something he didn't quite know how to hold on to. The next morning, Vanessa was gone before Mason woke up. She'd texted at 6. Already at the office. Don't wait up. This is going to take all day. Mason got coffee from the hotel lobby and tried to figure out what to do with himself. He'd brought a book he wasn't reading and papers to grade he wasn't grading. Mostly, he just sat in his room feeling useless. At noon, his phone rang. Vanessa. Hey, he answered. How's it going? Terrible. They're refusing to negotiate. Their lawyer's being a complete... She stopped herself. Sorry, I shouldn't be calling. I just needed to hear a friendly voice. I'm glad you called. You want me to bring you lunch? You don't have to do that. I know, but I'm offering anyway. A pause. There's a sandwich place 2 blocks from the office building, Sullivan's. Could you grab me something? Anything. I don't care what. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Mason found the place, ordered 2 sandwiches and chips, and headed to the office address Vanessa had texted him. The building was glass and steel, all corporate intimidation. He felt underdressed in jeans and a Henley. The receptionist eyed him suspiciously until he explained he was dropping off lunch for Vanessa Quinn. Her expression changed immediately to something like pity. Conference room C, 8th floor. Fair warning, it's tense up there. Mason took the elevator up. He could hear raised voices before he even found the right conference room. Through the glass wall, he could see Vanessa sitting at a long table across from 3 men in expensive suits. Her COO sat beside her, looking grim. Vanessa saw him through the glass. She excused herself and came out, closing the door behind her. You're a lifesaver, she said, taking the bag. But she didn't open it, just held it like a lifeline. That bad? Worse. They want double the termination fee. We can't afford that without tanking our stock price. She rubbed her face. I'm sorry. You didn't sign up for this. Actually, I kind of did, when I got in the car yesterday. She almost smiled. I need to get back in there. Go. I'll be at the hotel when you're done. Vanessa nodded, started to turn, then stopped. Mason, stay close to your phone in case I need to hear that friendly voice again. It'll be on. He watched her walk back into the conference room, shoulders squared, ready for battle. The door closed and she was back to being the untouchable CEO who never showed weakness. But for just a second in the hallway, she'd been Vanessa, his Vanessa, tired and overwhelmed and grateful for a sandwich. That night, she didn't get back to the hotel until after 10. Mason was half asleep in his room when his phone buzzed. Vanessa, you still awake? Mason, yeah, you okay? Vanessa, can you come up? Room 812. Mason was out the door before he'd fully processed what he was doing. He took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator, arriving slightly out of breath at her door. She answered in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, hair wet from a shower, looking more wrecked than he'd ever seen her. Come in, she said. The room was identical to his but felt different somehow, more lived in. Her laptop was open on the desk, papers spread everywhere. A half-eaten sandwich sat abandoned on the nightstand. We reached a compromise, Vanessa said, collapsing onto the edge of the bed. Not a good one, but better than complete disaster. They're still terminating the contract, but the fees are manageable. We'll survive. That's good. Is it? Because it feels like I just barely stopped the bleeding. And tomorrow I have to explain to my board why I let this happen in the first place. Mason sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. You didn't let anything happen. You trusted a business partner. They broke that trust. That's on them, not you. That's not how boards see it. They see a CEO who didn't have proper contingencies in place.
Then you tell them the truth. You made a decision based on the information you had at the time. It didn't work out. Here's how you're fixing it. Here's how you'll prevent it from happening again. He paused. You're allowed to make mistakes, Vanessa. Even CEOs. She turned to look at him. When did you get so wise? 6 months of therapy. She laughed, and it sounded real this time. I've been in therapy for 2 years, and I still don't know how to admit when I'm wrong. You just did. Right now. With me. Vanessa's expression softened. Yeah, I guess I did. They sat there in comfortable silence. Mason noticed she'd stopped maintaining the careful distance between them. Their shoulders were almost touching. I'm glad you're here, Vanessa said quietly. I keep saying that, but I mean it. Having you here, knowing you're just a text away, it makes this bearable. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. I can, and I am. Vanessa leaned her head against his shoulder. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental, like a wall coming down brick by brick. I'm exhausted, she murmured. Then sleep. The board meeting's not until tomorrow. I should prepare. Review the financials. Make sure I have answers for every question they might ask. Or you could rest. Be sharp tomorrow instead of running on fumes. She didn't move from his shoulder. Will you stay? Just for a little while? Until I fall asleep. Mason's heart kicked against his ribs. Yeah, I can do that. Vanessa shifted, pulling back the covers and climbing into bed fully clothed. Mason stayed where he was, sitting on top of the covers beside her. She reached for his hand. He gave it to her. Thank you, she whispered, for being here, for being patient with me, for not running when I'm a mess. You're not a mess. I really am. I just hide it well. Then thank you for letting me see it. Her breathing evened out within minutes. Mason sat there holding her hand, watching her sleep, and felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't about fixing what they'd broken. This was about building something new entirely, something that could withstand both of them being imperfect and scared and still trying anyway. He carefully extracted his hand after 20 minutes and stood to leave. As he reached the door, Vanessa's voice stopped him. Mason? He turned. She was barely awake, eyes half closed. Don't go. I thought you were asleep. Stay, please. Mason hesitated for exactly 2 seconds before toeing off his shoes and climbing onto the bed beside her. Not under the covers, still maintaining some boundary, but close enough that when she reached for him again, he was there. She curled into his side like it was the most natural thing in the world, like 3 years and a divorce and an ocean of grief hadn't happened between them. Is this okay? She mumbled against his chest. Yeah, this is okay. Within seconds, she was asleep again. Mason lay there, staring at the ceiling, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, and realized he was in serious trouble. Because somewhere between the mixer and the diner and the past few weeks of carefully rebuilding trust, he'd fallen completely back in love with his ex-wife, and he had no idea what to do about it. The next morning, Mason woke up alone. Vanessa had left a note on the pillow. Board meeting at 9. Thank you for last night. V. He found his shoes by the door and headed back to his room, feeling like he'd crossed some invisible line he couldn't uncross. His phone rang while he was brushing his teeth. Carter's face lit up the screen. Hey, bud, what's up? Dad, when are you coming home? Derek's wife keeps making me eat vegetables. Mason smiled despite himself. Vegetables are good for you. That's what she says, but I don't believe her. A pause. Are you still with Mom? Yeah, she's got meetings all day, but I'm here. Is she sad? The question caught Mason off guard. Why would you think she's sad? Because she's always sad. Even when she smiles, I can tell. Mason's throat tightened. His 7-year-old son had noticed something Mason had been blind to for 3 years. She's stressed right now, Mason said carefully. But I'm trying to help. That's why I'm here. Good. She needs help. She does too much by herself. When'd you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't notice because I act dumb sometimes. Mason laughed. Fair point. Listen, I'll be home in a few more days, okay? Be good for Derek and Kim. I'm always good. That's a lie, and we both know it. Carter giggled and hung up.
Mason stood there holding his phone, thinking about what his son had said. Vanessa always looked sad, even when she smiled. How had Carter seen that when Mason had missed it? Because you were too busy running from your own pain to notice hers, a voice in his head supplied helpfully. He pushed the thought away and got dressed. Vanessa texted around 11. Board meeting went better than expected. Free for lunch? They met at a small Italian place near her office. She looked less exhausted than yesterday, more like herself. They grilled me for 2 hours, she said, attacking her pasta like she hadn't eaten in days. But I had answers for everything. The numbers work. We'll take a hit this quarter, but we'll recover by Q2. That's great. It's not great. It's damage control. But it's better than catastrophe. She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. About last night. You don't have to explain. I want to. She set down her fork. I shouldn't have asked you to stay. We're supposed to be taking things slow, and I blurred a line that maybe shouldn't be blurred yet. Did you want me to stay? Yes. Then that's all that matters. We're not following some rule book here, Vanessa. We're figuring this out as we go. She studied him. You're different than you used to be. So are you. Is that good or bad? I think it's necessary. We can't go back to who we were. Those people broke each other. We have to be new people if we're going to make this work. And if the new people don't fit together, then at least we tried. Mason reached across the table, covering her hand with his. But I think we fit. Vanessa turned her hand over, lacing their fingers together. Yeah, I think we do too. They spent the rest of lunch talking about everything except work. Carter's latest obsession with dinosaurs, Chairman the Cat's reign of terror, the terrible poetry Mason had been writing, the true crime podcast Vanessa couldn't stop listening to even though it gave her nightmares. It felt normal, easy, like they'd been doing this for years instead of just weeks. When they stood to leave, Vanessa didn't let go of his hand right away. I have more meetings this afternoon, she said, but tonight I'm done, actually done. You want to do something? Like what? I don't know. Something that's not work-related, something normal. We could see a movie. A movie sounds perfect. They ended up at a theater showing some action film neither of them particularly cared about. They bought overpriced popcorn and terrible candy and sat in the back row like teenagers. Halfway through the movie, during an explosion sequence that was probably supposed to be impressive, Vanessa leaned over. This is terrible, she whispered. Absolutely awful, Mason agreed. Want to leave? Desperately. They snuck out like they were breaking rules, laughing as they hit the parking lot. It was barely 8 o'clock, and the Charlotte streets were alive with evening energy. Now what? Vanessa asked. Walk? They walked with no destination in mind, just moving through the city. Vanessa talked about the early days of building her company, when she'd been terrified and barely qualified and convinced she'd fail at any moment. Mason talked about the first year of teaching, when he'd been equally terrified and equally convinced. We were both pretending to know what we were doing, Vanessa said. Still are, probably. Definitely are. They found themselves in front of an ice cream shop. Without discussing it, they went inside and ordered cones like it was summer instead of late November. Outside, eating ice cream in the cold, Vanessa looked at Mason with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked. Nothing, just, this feels like us, the real us, not the version we tried to be when we were married. What version was that? The one where we pretended everything was perfect, where we didn't talk about hard things because we were afraid of ruining what we had. She licked melting ice cream off her hand. We should have had more nights like this, where we just existed together without trying so hard. We can have them now. Can we? Even with everything that's happened. Especially because of everything that's happened. We know what it's like to lose each other. Maybe that makes this mean more. Vanessa stopped walking. I don't want to lose you again. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. You won't, Mason said. Not if I have anything to say about it. You can't promise that. Watch me. Vanessa's eyes were bright, but she was smiling. You're impossibly stubborn, you know that? I learned from the best. She kissed him. Quick, impulsive, tasting like chocolate ice cream in 3 years of missed opportunities. When she pulled back, she looked surprised at herself. Sorry, I shouldn't have. Mason kissed her back. Slower this time, deliberate, his hand coming up to cup her face. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Oh, Vanessa said softly. Yeah. Oh. They stood there on the Charlotte sidewalk, ice cream melting forgotten in their hands, staring at each other like they'd just discovered something dangerous and wonderful. We're supposed to be taking this slow, Vanessa said, but she hadn't stepped back. We are. That was just one kiss. That was 2 kisses. Semantics. She laughed, and it sounded lighter than anything Mason had heard from her in years. What are we doing? I think we're figuring it out. This is terrifying. Yeah, but it's also pretty great. Vanessa nodded slowly. Yeah, it really is. They walked back to the hotel holding hands, not talking, just being. In the elevator, Vanessa leaned against him and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. At her floor, the doors opened. She didn't move. I should probably go to my room, she said. Be responsible, not complicate things. Probably. But I don't want to. Then don't. She looked up at him. Stay with me tonight? Just to sleep. Nothing complicated. Just, I don't want to be alone. You sure? No, but I'm asking anyway. Mason let the elevator doors close. They rode back up to the 8th floor together. In her room, they moved around each other carefully. Vanessa changing in the bathroom, Mason borrowing a t-shirt, both of them hyper-aware of the intimacy of the situation and trying not to overthink it. They climbed into bed on opposite sides, maintaining careful distance at first. But gradually, naturally, they gravitated toward each other. Vanessa's head found his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her waist. This okay? He asked quietly. More than okay. They lay there in the dark, listening to each other breathe. Mason? Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. Yeah? I think I'm falling for you again. Or maybe I never stopped. I don't know, but it scares me. Mason pressed a kiss to the top of her head. It scares me too. But maybe that means it matters. It matters so much it terrifies me. Me too. She was quiet for a long moment. Don't let me mess this up. If I start pushing you away or hiding behind work or doing any of the things I used to do, call me on it. Don't let me run. Same goes for you. If I shut down or go quiet, don't let me disappear. Deal. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in 3 years, Mason didn't dream about loss. He dreamed about possibility. They stayed in Charlotte for 5 more days. What had started as a crisis management trip turned into something else entirely. A chance to exist together without the weight of their history suffocating every interaction. Vanessa still had meetings and calls, still disappeared into conference rooms for hours at a time, but the evenings were theirs. They found a small Vietnamese restaurant tucked into a side street and ate there 3 nights in a row. Discovered a bookstore that stayed open until midnight. Walked through neighborhoods they'd never see again, talking about everything and nothing. And every night they fell asleep in the same bed, wrapped around each other like they'd never been apart. On the 6th day, Vanessa's COO told her the situation was stable enough for her to work remotely. They could go home. I should be relieved, Vanessa said as they packed. But I'm not ready to leave this bubble we've been in. Mason folded a shirt and placed it in his duffel. The bubble comes with us. Does it? What happens when we're back in Asheville and real life kicks in? When I'm drowning in work again and you're managing Carter and teaching? What if we can't sustain this? Then we figure it out, together this time. Vanessa sat on the edge of the bed holding a sweater she'd forgotten to pack. I want to believe that. So believe it. It's not that simple. Mason stopped packing and sat beside her. Why not? Because I've spent 3 years building a life that doesn't need anyone else. A life where I'm safe because I'm self-sufficient. And now you're here, and I'm realizing how lonely that life actually was, and it scares the hell out of me. Being lonely scared you less than being with someone? Being lonely can't hurt me the way losing someone can. Her voice cracked. I barely survived losing you the first time, Mason. I can't do that again. You won't have to. You don't know that. No. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to make sure it doesn't happen. He took her hand. I'm not the same person who shut down 3 years ago. I'm not going to disappear on you again. Vanessa leaned her head against his shoulder. What if I'm the one who disappears? What if I get scared and bury myself in work and push you away? Then I'll pull you back. That's the deal, remember? We call each other on it when we start falling into old patterns. She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to do this. How to be vulnerable with someone and not feel like I'm losing control of everything. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. They drove back to Asheville that afternoon, Vanessa's hand resting on Mason's knee while he drove, both of them acutely aware that they were leaving the safety of Charlotte and heading back into real life. Derek's house was chaos when Mason arrived to pick up Carter. 3 kids under 10, a dog barking, and Kim trying to cook dinner while refereeing a dispute over a video game controller. Your son, Derek announced when he opened the door, is an angel compared to mine. He can stay any time. Carter appeared behind him, grinning. Dad, you're back. Mason scooped him up, even though he was getting too big for it. Miss me? A little. Kim makes really good cookies, though, so it wasn't that bad. Kim appeared from the kitchen, laughing. Thanks, Carter. Really feeling the love here. They stayed for dinner because refusing Kim's cooking was basically illegal. Afterward, while the kids played in the basement, Derek cornered Mason in the kitchen. So, Charlotte, how'd it go? Good. Really good. Define good. Mason hesitated. We're together, kind of. We're figuring it out. Derek's eyebrows shot up. Together? Like dating? Or like, I don't know what we are exactly, but we're trying. Does Caroline know? Not yet. That conversation's going to be fun. Derek clapped him on the shoulder. I'm happy for you, man. Terrified for you because Caroline's going to murder you, but happy. They left around 8. Carter fell asleep in the car before they even hit the highway, exhausted from a week of playing with Derek's kids. Mason carried him inside and got him into bed, then stood in the doorway of Carter's room for a long moment, watching him sleep. His son had lived through the loss of his sister, the divorce of his parents, and 3 years of his father barely holding it together. And somehow, he'd come out the other side still able to laugh and trust and love. Kids were resilient in ways adults forgot how to be. Mason's phone buzzed. Vanessa. Home safe? Mason. Just got Carter to bed. You okay? Vanessa. Chairman's mad I was gone. He knocked over a plant in protest. Mason smiled. Sounds about right. Vanessa. Can I see you tomorrow? Actual date, not crisis management. Mason. Yes. Where? Vanessa. Surprise me. The next afternoon, Mason picked Vanessa up at 2. She came out wearing jeans and a jacket, hair in a ponytail, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in weeks. Where are we going? She asked, climbing into his car. You said to surprise you. I'm regretting that now. Mason drove them out of the city, into the mountains where the trees were still clinging to the last of their fall colors. About 30 minutes out, he pulled off onto a dirt road that led to a trailhead. We're hiking? Vanessa looked at her shoes. I'm not really dressed for... It's an easy trail, barely 2 miles. And there's something I want to show you. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Okay, lead the way. They walked in comfortable silence, the trail winding through bare trees and over a small creek. The air was cold but not freezing, their breath fogging in front of them. I used to come here with my dad, Mason said eventually. Before he died, when I was a kid, he'd bring me up here when I needed to clear my head. I didn't know that. I never told you. There's a lot I never told you. He glanced at her. I'm trying to change that. The trail opened up into a small clearing with a view of the valley below. Mountains stretched out in every direction, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold. Wow, Vanessa breathed. Yeah. They sat on a fallen log at the edge of the clearing. For a while, they just looked at the view, not talking. I'm glad you brought me here, Vanessa said quietly. I wanted you to see it. This place, it's where I come when things feel too big to handle, when I need perspective. It's beautiful. After Lily died, I couldn't come here for 2 years. It hurt too much. Being somewhere peaceful felt wrong when everything inside me was chaos. He picked up a stick, turning it over in his hands. But about 6 months ago, I finally came back, and I realized the place hadn't changed, just me. Vanessa leaned against him. I'm sorry I wasn't there for those 2 years, that you had to figure out how to come back here alone. I'm sorry I made you figure out everything alone. They sat there as the sun started to sink lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I want to tell you something, Vanessa said, and I need you to not interrupt until I'm done. Mason's stomach tightened. Okay. When we were married, I spent so much energy trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could make everything work. And when Lily died, I felt like I'd failed at the most important thing in the world. Her voice was shaking, but she kept going. And then you shut down, and I took that as confirmation that I'd failed you too, that I wasn't enough to make you want to stay present. Vanessa, thus, let me finish. She took a breath. I spent 3 years believing that, building this whole identity around being someone who didn't need anyone because needing people just led to failure. And then you showed up at that mixer and said her name, and everything I'd built started cracking because I realized I'd been lying to myself. I do need people. I need you. And that terrifies me more than anything. Mason waited to make sure she was done. Can I talk now? Yeah. You didn't fail me. You didn't fail Lily. You didn't fail anyone. He turned to face her fully. I failed you. I was so caught up in my own grief that I couldn't see you drowning right next to me. And I've spent 3 years trying to forgive myself for that, and mostly failing. We both failed each other. Yeah, we did. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we needed to fail spectacularly so we could figure out how to do it right this time. Vanessa wiped at her eyes. What if we fail again? Then we try again, and again, until we get it right or we can't anymore. But I'd rather fail trying with you than succeed at being alone. She kissed him, and it tasted like salt and hope and 3 years of missing each other. When they broke apart, the sun was almost gone, the valley below them fading into shadow. We should head back before it gets dark, Mason said. Yeah, but neither of them moved. Eventually, they made their way back down the trail, hands linked, stumbling occasionally in the fading light. By the time they reached the car, it was full dark, and they were both laughing about nothing in particular. Mason drove Vanessa home. At her door, she turned to him. Come inside? Carter's with Derek again, but I'm not asking for anything complicated. I just want more time with you. We can order food, watch a movie, be normal. Normal sounded perfect. Inside, Chairman the cat materialized from nowhere and immediately began judging Mason with the intensity only cats could manage. He'll warm up to you, Vanessa said, scooping up the tabby. Eventually, maybe. They ordered Thai food and settled on the couch with a movie neither of them paid attention to. Halfway through, Vanessa's phone rang. She glanced at it and groaned. It's Caroline. You should answer. She's going to ask about Charlotte, about us. So tell her the truth. Vanessa looked at him like he'd suggested skydiving without a parachute. You clearly don't know my sister. But she answered anyway, putting it on speaker. Hey, Caroline. Don't hey Caroline me. I heard you were in Charlotte with Mason for almost a week. Want to explain that? Vanessa's eyes met Mason's. He nodded encouragingly. We're seeing each other, Vanessa said. Dating. Trying to figure out if we can make this work. Silence on the other end. Then, are you out of your mind? Probably. He hurt you, Vanessa, badly, and now you're just… What? Pretending that didn't happen? No. We're acknowledging it happened and trying to move forward anyway. Vanessa's voice was steady. I love him, Caroline. I never stopped, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. More silence. Mason could practically hear Caroline recalibrating. If he hurts you again, he won't. You can't know that. No, but I can choose to trust him anyway. That's what I'm doing. A long sigh. I think you're making a mistake, but you're an adult, and it's your life. A pause. But Mason, if you're listening, and I know you are because Vanessa always puts me on speaker, my threat still stands. You hurt her, I destroy you. Understood, Mason said. Good. Vanessa, call me tomorrow. We need to talk about Q4 projections. It's Sunday tomorrow. So, call me. She hung up. Vanessa dropped her phone on the couch. That went better than expected. She only threatened to destroy me once, practically a blessing. They went back to ignoring the movie. Chairman eventually deemed Mason acceptable and settled on his lap, purring loudly. I think that's cat approval, Vanessa said. Is it binding? Completely. You're stuck with us now. Us. The words settled into Mason's chest and stayed there. Around midnight, Mason stood to leave. Vanessa walked him to the door, and they stood there in that awkward space where neither wanted the night to end, but both knew it should. Can I take you to dinner this week? Mason asked. Actual restaurant, reservations, the whole thing. Like a real date? Exactly like a real date. Vanessa smiled. I'd like that. He kissed her goodnight, soft, lingering, full of promise, and drove home feeling like he was floating. The week passed in a blur of normalcy that felt almost surreal. Mason taught his classes, graded papers, coached basketball. Vanessa ran her company, handled meetings, put out fires, but every evening they talked. Sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. About their days, about nothing, about everything. Friday night, Mason made reservations at a nice Italian place downtown. He picked Vanessa up at 7, and she answered the door wearing a dark green dress that made his brain short-circuit momentarily. You look incredible, he managed. You don't look so bad yourself. The restaurant was dimly lit, intimate without being stuffy. They ordered wine and pasta and talked like people who were still learning each other, but also like people who'd known each other forever. Can I ask you something? Vanessa said over dessert. Sure. What do you want? Long term, I mean, with us? Mason set down his fork. Honestly, I want everything. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life together that's messier and more real than what we had before. I want Carter to have his mom back. I want to give us the second chance we should have had 3 years ago. He paused. But I know that's a lot. And I know we're taking this slow. So for now, I just want more nights like this. More time to prove that we can do this right. Vanessa's eyes were bright. I want that too, all of it. But it scares me. Me too. What if we rush this and it falls apart? What if we don't rush it and it still falls apart? There's no guarantee, Vanessa. We could do everything perfectly and still fail. Or we could stumble through it messily and somehow make it work. Which do you think we'll do? The messy one. Definitely the messy one. She laughed and the sound filled him with warmth. Yeah, probably. They left the restaurant hand in hand, walking slowly through downtown Asheville. The streets were alive with Friday night energy. People spilling out of bars, street musicians playing for spare change, couples and groups of friends everywhere. I love this city, Vanessa said. I forgot how much until recently. You've been too busy running your empire to notice. I've been too busy hiding to notice. She stopped walking. But I'm done hiding. From work, from grief, from you. I'm done. Mason pulled her close. Good. Because I'm done running. They kissed in the middle of the sidewalk while people flowed around them, and for the first time in 3 years, Mason felt completely certain of something. This was right. They were right. Messy and imperfect and still healing, but right. They walked back to where Mason had parked, taking the long way, neither wanting the night to end. At her house, Vanessa invited him inside for coffee that they both knew was code for not being ready to say goodbye yet. They ended up on her couch again, coffee forgotten, talking about everything. Vanessa told him about the year after the divorce, how she'd thrown herself into work so completely that her assistant had to remind her to eat. Mason told her about the months he'd spent barely functioning, going through the motions of parenting and teaching while feeling nothing inside. I think I was depressed, he admitted, like clinically. I just didn't realize it at the time. Me too. My therapist said I was having a delayed grief response mixed with major depression. I didn't believe her until she showed me the diagnostic criteria, and I checked every single box. We were a mess. We still are, kind of. Yeah, but we're a mess together now. That's different. Vanessa shifted closer to him. Can I tell you something without you freaking out? Depends on what it is. I've been thinking about what it would look like if we did this for real. Not just dating, actually being together again. Mason's heart kicked into overdrive. Yeah? Yeah. And I know it's too soon to talk about that. We've only been doing this for a few weeks and we're supposed to be taking it slow, but I can't stop thinking about it. What does it look like? In your head? Oh. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. It looks like mornings where we drink coffee together before the chaos starts. It looks like you being there when I come home from terrible days at work. It looks like Carter having both of us, together, not splitting his time between separate houses. She paused. It looks like being a family again. Mason's throat was tight. That's what I want too. Really? Really? But I meant what I said about taking this slow. Not because I don't want those things, but because I want to make sure we build a foundation that can actually hold the weight of all of it. How do we do that? I don't know. Keep being honest with each other. Keep showing up. Keep saying Lily's name and not pretending the past didn't happen. He took her hand. Keep choosing each other every day instead of assuming we'll always be okay. Vanessa nodded slowly. I can do that. So can I. They sat there on the couch as the night stretched on, talking until Vanessa's eyes started to close. Mason should have left, gone home to his own bed, maintained some semblance of boundaries. But when Vanessa asked him to stay, he couldn't say no. They fell asleep on the couch together, tangled up in each other, and a blanket Vanessa pulled from somewhere, and woke up at 3 a.m. with stiff necks and Chairman sitting on Mason's chest judging them. We should move to an actual bed, Vanessa mumbled. Probably. Neither of them moved for another 10 minutes. Eventually they stumbled upstairs still half asleep and collapsed into Vanessa's bed fully clothed. Mason woke up a few hours later to sunlight streaming through the windows and Vanessa curled against his side, her hair a mess, makeup smudged, looking absolutely perfect. He watched her sleep for a few minutes, feeling the weight of what they were building settle over him. This wasn't the fairy tale version of getting back together. This was messy and complicated, and they were both still carrying scars that might never fully heal. But it was real, and that made it worth everything. Vanessa's eyes fluttered open. You're staring. You're beautiful. I'm a disaster. I didn't even wash my face last night. Beautiful disaster, then. She smiled, stretching. What time is it? Almost 8. I should probably get up. I have work emails to answer. It's Saturday. CEOs don't get Saturdays. Mason pulled her closer. Take one Saturday off. The emails will still be there tomorrow. That's terrible advice. Probably, but I'm giving it anyway. Vanessa hesitated, then relaxed back against him. Okay. One Saturday off. But if my company collapses, I'm blaming you. Deal. They stayed in bed for another hour, talking quietly about nothing important. When they finally got up, Mason made coffee while Vanessa tried to tame her hair into something presentable. I should go home, he said, handing her a mug. Check on Carter. Make sure Derek hasn't corrupted him completely. Or you could bring Carter here. We could do something together, the three of us. Mason paused mid-sip. You sure? Yeah, I miss him, and if we're really doing this, he should be part of it. He's going to have questions. I know, we'll answer them, together. Mason called Derek, who was predictably smug about the whole situation. An hour later, Carter was bouncing through Vanessa's front door like he owned the place. Mom, your house is huge, Vanessa laughed, crouching down to hug him. Hi, baby. I missed you. I missed you too. Can I see your cat? He's around here somewhere, probably judging us from a high surface. They spent the afternoon doing normal things, playing board games, making lunch together, watching Carter and Chairman engage in a tentative friendship. It felt natural in a way Mason hadn't expected, like they'd been doing this all along instead of just starting. At one point, while Carter was in the bathroom, Vanessa leaned against Mason. This is nice, she said quietly. Yeah, it really is. Think we can actually do this? Build something real? Mason looked at her, at this woman he'd loved and lost and found again, and felt certainty settle in his chest. Yeah, he said. I think we can. And for the first time in 3 years, he actually believed it. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. Mason had been naive to think they would be. There were nights when Vanessa got so buried in work she forgot to return his calls. Days when Mason felt himself slipping back into silence and had to force himself to speak up instead of shutting down. Moments when they both panicked and nearly ran from what they were building. But the difference was they caught each other every single time. 2 months into whatever they were calling this, Vanessa showed up at Mason's house at 11 at night, still in her work clothes, looking wrecked. I had a panic attack in my office, she said when he opened the door. Full blown, couldn't breathe, thought I was dying panic attack. And the first person I wanted to call was you. Mason pulled her inside. What happened?
Nothing. Everything. I don't know. She was shaking. I was reviewing contracts and suddenly I couldn't stop thinking about how much I have riding on this company, how many people depend on me, how one wrong decision could tank everything I've built. And then I started thinking about Lily and about losing you again, and I couldn't breathe. Mason wrapped his arms around her. You're breathing now. That's what matters. I left work in the middle of a meeting, just walked out. My COO probably thinks I've lost my mind. Did you tell anyone where you were going? I texted my assistant that I had an emergency. Then I drove here. She pulled back to look at him. I'm sorry. I should have called first. I just needed... You don't have to apologize. I'm glad you came. They sat on his couch, Vanessa curled against him, while he just held her. After a while, her breathing evened out. My therapist keeps telling me I need to stop equating my worth with my company's performance, she said quietly, that I'm allowed to be human, make mistakes, but I don't know how to do that when being perfect is the only thing that's kept me afloat for 3 years. You're not perfect, Vanessa. Neither am I. That's kind of the point. I know. Intellectually, I know, but actually believing it is different. Mason pressed a kiss to her temple. Want to hear something crazy? Always. I'm glad you had a panic attack. She pulled back, eyebrows raised. Excuse me? Not glad you suffered. Glad you came here instead of dealing with it alone. Glad you let me see you falling apart instead of pretending you're fine. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. That's progress. Vanessa's eyes filled. I hate that you're right. Get used to it. I'm right occasionally. She laughed despite herself. Very occasionally. They stayed like that for hours, just being together. Eventually, Vanessa fell asleep on his couch, and Mason covered her with a blanket and let her rest. When she woke up at 3 a.m, disoriented, he was still there. You stayed, she mumbled. Where else would I go? Your bed, like a normal person. Normal's overrated, she smiled sleepily. Take me to bed? They stumbled upstairs together. Mason lent her a t-shirt and she changed in his bathroom. And when she climbed into his bed, she fit there like she'd never left. Like the past 3 years had been a strange dream, and this was where she'd always belonged. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness, for not making me feel weak for falling apart. You're the strongest person I know. Having a panic attack doesn't change that. Doesn't feel like it. I know, but it's true anyway. In the morning, they woke up to Carter standing in the doorway staring at them. Why is Mom in your bed? Mason's brain scrambled for an answer. Vanessa saved him. I had a hard night, sweetie. Your dad let me stay over. Carter processed this. Like a sleepover? Exactly like a sleepover. Cool. Can we have pancakes? Just like that, the crisis was averted. They made pancakes together, the 3 of them moving around Mason's small kitchen like they'd choreographed it. Carter chattered about school and basketball, while Vanessa and Mason exchanged glances over his head, looks that said everything they couldn't say out loud with their son present. This was what they were building toward, this messy, imperfect version of family that somehow felt more real than anything they'd had before. Later, after Vanessa had gone home and Carter was at a friend's house, Derek called. So I heard Vanessa's car was in your driveway all night. Want to explain? How do you know where her car was? Kim drove past on her way to yoga. You're the talk of the neighborhood, man. Mason groaned. We weren't. It's not. She had a panic attack and needed somewhere to go. And she came to you. Yeah. That's big. I know. Derek was quiet for a moment. You're really doing this, aren't you? Getting back together for real. Yeah, I think we are. I'm happy for you. Terrified, but happy. Why terrified? Because you're both still healing, and sometimes healing people hurt each other without meaning to. I just don't want to see you destroyed if this doesn't work out. It's going to work out. You sound certain. I am. For the first time in 3 years, I'm certain about something. Derek sighed. All right, but I'm here if you need me, for celebration or disaster, whichever comes first. Thanks, man. Mason hung up thinking about what Derek had said. They were both still healing. That was true. But maybe the healing was part of it. Maybe you didn't have to be completely whole to love someone.
Maybe you just had to be willing to keep trying. 3 weeks later, in early January, everything came to a head in the most unexpected way. Mason was at Vanessa's house when Caroline showed up unannounced. She walked in using the key Vanessa had given her years ago, clearly expecting to find her sister alone. Instead, she found Mason and Vanessa cooking dinner together while music played from Vanessa's phone. Caroline stopped in the doorway. "Oh, you're here." "Hi, Caroline," Mason said, trying to sound casual. "I didn't realize you two were—" She gestured vaguely at the domestic scene. "This serious?" Vanessa set down her wine glass. "Want to stay for dinner?" "No, I want to talk to you. Alone." Mason started to excuse himself, but Vanessa caught his hand. "Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of Mason." Caroline's jaw tightened. "Fine. I think you're making a mistake. I think you're so desperate to not be alone that you're running back to the person who hurt you most. And I think you're going to regret it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa's hand tightened on Mason's. "You done?" "No, I'm not." Caroline's voice was sharp. "I love you. I watched you rebuild yourself from nothing after he left. Watched you become someone stronger and more successful than you ever were with him. And now you're throwing all of that away for what? Nostalgia? Comfort? The fantasy that you can fix something that was broken from the start?" "Caroline," Vanessa's voice had an edge Mason recognized. She was getting angry. "You deserve better than someone who abandoned you when things got hard. You deserve someone who won't disappear the second life gets difficult again." Mason felt like he'd been slapped, but before he could respond, Vanessa did. "You're wrong." Her voice was quiet but firm. "About all of it. I'm not running back to anything. I'm choosing to build something new with someone who knows my worst pain because he lived through it too. Someone who's done the work to change. Someone who shows up every single day even when it's hard. Vanessa." "I'm not finished." Vanessa's eyes were blazing now. "You want to protect me. I get that. You've been protecting me since we were kids. But I don't need protection from Mason. I need a partner. Someone who sees me at my worst and doesn't run. Someone who lets me see them at their worst too. And that's what Mason is." Caroline looked between them. "You're really doing this?" "Yes. Even though it might not work out. Even though, because the alternative is spending the rest of my life alone because I'm too afraid to take a risk. And I'm done being afraid." Caroline's expression softened slightly. "If he hurts you, he won't. But if he does, I'll survive. Just like I survived losing Lily. Just like I survived the divorce. I'm stronger than you think I am. I know how strong you are. I just don't want you to have to prove it again." Vanessa crossed to her sister and hugged her. "I love you for caring, but you have to let me make my own choices. Even if they're mistakes." Caroline hugged her back, then pulled away and looked at Mason. "You break her heart. I'll make good on every threat I've made." "Understood." "Good." She grabbed her purse. "I'm leaving. But Vanessa, call me tomorrow. We need to talk about the Henderson contract." "It's Sunday tomorrow." "And? Call me." She left, the door closing firmly behind her. Mason and Vanessa stood in the kitchen, the music still playing, dinner half cooked on the stove. "That was intense," Mason said. "That was Caroline being Caroline." Vanessa turned back to the stove. "She'll come around eventually. She always does." "You meant what you said about me being your partner?" Vanessa looked at him over her shoulder. "Every word." Something in Mason's chest cracked open. He crossed to her, turned her away from the stove, and kissed her like he'd been wanting to all night. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "What was that for?" "For defending me. For choosing me. For being brave enough to try this even though it scares you. It terrifies me." "Me too." They finished making dinner together, and later, after they'd eaten and cleaned up, they ended up on the couch with wine and old photo albums Vanessa had pulled from somewhere. "I found these when I was packing to move," she said, opening one. "I couldn't look at them for the longest time, but a few months ago, I finally could." The photos were from their wedding, their honeymoon, the early years of their marriage when everything still felt possible. There were photos of Vanessa pregnant, glowing and happy, photos of Carter as a newborn, tiny and red-faced and perfect, and then photos of Lily. Mason's breath caught. He hadn't seen these in 3 years, hadn't been able to bear it. Vanessa turned a page, and there she was. Their daughter, 8 months old, smiling at the camera. She was wearing a yellow dress, had a bow in her thin baby hair. She was beautiful, Vanessa whispered. She was perfect. They sat there looking at photos of their daughter, and for the first time, it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like remembering, like honoring, like acknowledging that she'd existed and mattered and would always be part of them. "I want to do something," Vanessa said suddenly. "For Lily, something permanent." "Like what?" "I don't know. Maybe plant a tree or donate to the hospital in her name. Something that says she was here, that she mattered." Mason thought about it. "What about a bench at that park where we used to walk when you were pregnant? With a plaque?" Vanessa's eyes filled. "That's perfect." They researched it that night, curled up on the couch with Vanessa's laptop. Found the right permits, the right company. Designed a simple plaque that read, "In memory of Lily Rose Hale. Brief but loved beyond measure." "She would have been 4 next month," Vanessa said quietly. "I know. Do you think about who she would have been?" "All the time. I think she would have been stubborn like you, smart like you, probably would have had me wrapped around her finger." Vanessa smiled through tears. She definitely would have been a daddy's girl. They sat there in the quiet, remembering their daughter, and Mason realized this was healing too. Not forgetting, not moving on, but learning to carry the grief without letting it crush them. A month later, the bench was installed. They went to see it on a Sunday afternoon, just the two of them. It sat under a large oak tree, facing the pond where ducks swam in lazy circles. Vanessa traced the letters of Lily's name on the plaque, tears streaming down her face. Mason sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, and they cried together. "Thank you," Vanessa said eventually, "for doing this with me, for not running when it got hard. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me enough to include me." They sat on Lily's bench for an hour, talking about her, sharing memories they'd been too afraid to voice before. And when they finally left, Mason felt lighter somehow, like they'd set something down that they'd been carrying too long. That night, over dinner at Mason's house with Carter, happily playing video games in the other room, Vanessa looked at Mason across the table. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And if it's too soon, just say so." Mason's heart kicked up. "Okay. I've been thinking about what we're doing, how we're building this relationship. And I realized something." She took a breath. "I don't want to date you. I don't want to keep having sleepovers and pretending we're taking things slow when we both know where this is headed." Mason's stomach dropped. "Vanessa, let me finish. I don't want to date you because I want more than that. I want us to be together, really together. I want to stop splitting Carter's time between houses. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to fight about whose turn it is to take out the trash and make terrible dinners together and be bored together on Sunday afternoons." Mason stared at her. "You want to move in together?" "I want to get married again." The words hit him like a physical thing. "What?" Vanessa's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "I know it's crazy. I know we've only been doing this for a few months. But Mason, I spent 3 years without you, and I don't want to waste another second. I love you. I never stopped loving you. And I don't want to date you carefully for 2 years before we admit what we both already know. Which is that we belong together, that we're better together than apart, that we've already survived the worst thing that could happen to us. And we're still here, still fighting for this." She reached across the table for his hand. "So I'm asking, will you marry me? Again?" Mason's throat was so tight he could barely speak. "You don't even have a ring," Vanessa laughed, wiping at her eyes. "Is that a yes?" "I have a ring, upstairs. I bought it 3 weeks ago because I was planning to ask you the same question and was trying to figure out the right time." Now Vanessa was the one staring. "You were going to propose?" "Yeah, I just thought I should wait. Be responsible, not rush things." "Screw being responsible. We've been responsible. It's boring." Mason laughed, despite the tears streaming down his face. "You're absolutely insane. Is that a yes?" He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her. "Yes, it's a yes, to all of it. Moving in together, getting married, building a life that's messy and imperfect and completely ours." Vanessa kissed him back, laughing and crying at the same time. From the living room, Carter's voice called out, "Are you guys being gross in there?" They broke apart, both grinning like idiots. "Come here, bud," Mason called. "We need to tell you something." Carter appeared in the doorway, controller still in hand, looking suspicious. "What?" Vanessa crouched down to his level. "How would you feel about me and your dad getting married again?" Carter's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? If that's okay with you." Carter looked between them. "Would you live here, or would we live at your house? We'd figure that out together, all three of us. And Chairman?" "Chairman, too." Carter thought about it for approximately 5 seconds. "Okay, but I get to be in the wedding." "You can be the best man," Mason said. "What's a best man?" "The most important person, besides the bride and groom." "Cool. Can I go back to my game now?" They laughed, and Carter disappeared back into the living room like they hadn't just completely changed his life. "That went well," Vanessa said. "He's 7. Everything's easy when you're 7. Mason went upstairs and came back with the ring, a simple band with a small diamond, nothing flashy. He'd chosen it because it reminded him of Vanessa, elegant without being ostentatious, strong without being harsh. He slid it onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. "When?" Vanessa asked. "When what?" "When do you want to get married?" "I don't want to wait. I've wasted enough time." Mason thought about it. "Spring, small ceremony, just family and close friends. Caroline's going to freak out." "Probably, but she'll come around." "Derek's going to say I told you so." "Definitely, but he'll be happy for us." They stood in the kitchen holding each other, and Mason thought about everything they'd been through to get here. The grief, the divorce, the 3 years of silence, the singles mixer that had changed everything, the diner, Charlotte. Every moment had led to this. "I love you," he said. "I never stopped, even when I couldn't say it." "I love you too. Even when I hated you, I loved you." "We're really doing this. We really are." They told Caroline the next day. She did in fact freak out. Spent 20 minutes listing all the reasons this was a terrible idea before finally admitting that maybe, possibly, she could see it working. Maybe. Derek was predictably smug but also genuinely happy. Kim cried and immediately started planning the wedding, even though Vanessa insisted they wanted something small. Over the next few months, they figured out the logistics. Decided to keep Mason's house since Carter was settled there, but combined their furniture and belongings until the place actually felt like a home instead of a bachelor pad. Vanessa slowly moved her things in, one box at a time, until her books lined the shelves and her coffee mugs cluttered the kitchen, and Chairman ruled the house with an iron paw. They fought sometimes. About stupid things like who forgot to buy milk, and bigger things like how much Vanessa was working and how much Mason was retreating into his head when stressed. But they fought differently than before, with words instead of silence, with honesty instead of avoidance. And they went to therapy together, sat in Dr. Patterson's office and talked about their marriage, their grief, their fears about repeating old patterns, learned tools for communicating, for recognizing when they were falling into destructive habits. It wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others. Some nights Vanessa woke up crying about Lily, and Mason held her until the grief passed. Some mornings Mason shut down and went quiet, and Vanessa gently pulled him back out. But they kept showing up, for each other, for Carter, for the life they were building. The wedding happened in April, in Caroline's backyard under string lights and a sky-threatening rain. They'd invited 30 people, close friends, family, a few colleagues. The elderly waitress from Dixon's diner came, wearing her best dress and crying through the entire ceremony. Carter stood beside Mason, holding the rings and taking his job so seriously he looked like a tiny adult. Vanessa wore a simple cream dress and flowers in her hair. She was beautiful in a way that made Mason's chest ache. When it came time for vows, Vanessa went first. She'd written them down but didn't look at the paper. "The first time I married you, I thought love meant never fighting, never struggling, never showing weakness." Her voice was steady despite the tears on her face. "I thought if we just loved each other enough, everything would be easy. And when it wasn't easy, when we lost Lily and everything fell apart, I thought it meant we'd failed." She paused, looking directly at Mason. "But I was wrong. Love isn't about things being easy. It's about showing up when things are hard.
It's about being brave enough to be broken in front of someone and trusting they won't leave. It's about choosing each other every single day, even when it would be easier to walk away. Mason's vision blurred. So I'm marrying you today, not because I think it'll be easy. I'm marrying you because I know it'll be hard sometimes, and I want to face that hardness with you. Because you're the only person I want beside me when life gets impossible. Because you knew me at my worst and loved me anyway. Because our daughter existed, and you remember her with me, and that matters more than I can say. She wiped at her eyes. I'm marrying you because we survived losing everything and still found our way back to each other. And if that's not love, I don't know what is. By the time she finished, half the guests were crying. Mason took a breath, trying to steady himself. I don't have anything written down, he admitted, because I tried about 20 times and nothing felt right. So I'm just going to say what's in my head and hope it makes sense. Vanessa smiled through tears. 3 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I let grief turn me into someone who couldn't face his own pain, let alone help you face yours. I shut down when you needed me most. And I've spent every day since trying to figure out how to forgive myself for that. He reached for her hands. But then you showed up at that singles mixer, and you let me back into your life even though you had every reason not to. And you showed me that people can change, that we can survive impossible things and come out the other side still capable of love. Mason's voice cracked. I'm not the same person I was when we got divorced, and you're not the same person either. We're both scarred and imperfect and still figuring things out. But I think that's the point. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be willing to keep trying. He squeezed her hands. So I'm promising you today that I'll show up. When things are easy and when they're hard. When you need me to listen and when you need me to push back. When you're strong and when you're falling apart, I'll be there every single time for the rest of my life. Vanessa was fully crying now. So was Caroline. So was Derek. So was pretty much everyone there. They exchanged rings, kissed while everyone cheered, and just like that, they were married again. At the reception, Carter gave a speech that was mostly about how he was glad to have his mom back, and also could he please have cake now. Derek gave a speech about watching Mason be miserable for 3 years and how glad he was that particular chapter was over. Caroline gave a speech that was half threat directed at Mason and half genuine happiness for her sister. And Mason and Vanessa danced to a song that had played at their first wedding 8 years ago, when they'd been young and naive and convinced love was all you needed. We were so stupid, Vanessa said, her head on his shoulder. Incredibly stupid. Think we're less stupid now? Marginally, she laughed. Good enough. They danced until the rain finally came, sending everyone scrambling for cover. They ended up in Caroline's kitchen with 30 people crammed together, eating cake and telling stories and celebrating messily and imperfectly. Later, after most people had left and Carter had fallen asleep on Caroline's couch, Mason and Vanessa stood in the backyard under an umbrella, watching the rain. Thank you, Vanessa said quietly. For what? For not giving up. On me. On us. For fighting for this even when it would have been easier to walk away. You fought too. We both did. She turned to look at him. I'm glad we did. Me too. They stood there in the rain, two people who'd loved and lost and found each other again, and Mason thought about all the people who'd told them this was a mistake. That you couldn't go back? That some things were too broken to fix. Maybe they were right. Maybe you couldn't go back. But you could go forward. You could take everything you'd learned from breaking and use it to build something stronger. You could acknowledge the pain and the scars and choose to love anyway. That's what they'd done. What they were still doing. And standing there in Caroline's backyard on their second wedding night, Mason realized that maybe that was the whole point. Not avoiding pain. Not pretending everything was perfect, but choosing to face life's impossibilities together instead of alone. Come on, Vanessa said, tugging his hand. Let's go home. Home. Not his house or her house. Home. The place they'd built together. The life they were creating. They gathered up Carter, said their goodbyes, and drove through the rain back to a house that smelled like coffee and wet dog and the life they were living. Chairman met them at the door, demanding attention. Carter stumbled upstairs half asleep. And Mason and Vanessa stood in their kitchen, the same kitchen where they'd had their first real conversation after the diner, where Vanessa had proposed, where they'd fought and made up and learned how to be partners instead of just spouses,
and looked at each other. "So," Vanessa said, "we did it. We really did. Now what?" Mason pulled her close. "Now we live, messily and imperfectly, and together." "That sounds perfect." "It sounds like chaos." "Same thing." They laughed, and the sound filled the house with warmth. Outside, the rain continued. Inside, they had everything they needed. Not a perfect life, not a life without pain or struggle or hard days ahead, but a life they'd chosen, together, on purpose, with full knowledge of what they were getting into. And that made all the difference. Because sometimes love wasn't about fairy tale endings. Sometimes it was about two broken people deciding that broken together was better than whole apart. Sometimes it was about choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Sometimes love was simply showing up, and keeping showing up. Until showing up became the life you built. That's what Mason and Vanessa had learned, what they would keep learning. And as they stood in their messy, imperfect kitchen in the home they'd created, they knew that whatever came next, joy or grief, easy days or impossible ones, they'd face it together. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.